They had no idea the man they just arrested in handcuffs actually owned the entire building and was about to expose their shocking failure in the most devastating way imaginable. Picture this: a billionaire tech CEO gets handcuffed by his own security team, accused of corporate espionage and nearly charged with felonies, all while working late in his own headquarters that he built from nothing. But when he proves his identity using secret executive access codes that leave everyone speechless, the swift justice that follows will restore your faith in accountability. Watch until the end to see how one man's false arrest sparked a $4 million revolution that's transforming corporate security across America. This isn't just about racial profiling in the workplace. It's proof that even our most humiliating experiences can become the catalyst for extraordinary change that protects millions of employees who deserve to work with dignity and belonging.
They had no idea the man they just arrested in handcuffs actually owned the entire building and was about to expose their shocking failure in the most devastating way imaginable. Meet Marcus Thompson, a name that should command instant recognition in every Silicon Valley boardroom, yet remains invisible to those who measure leadership by appearance rather than achievement. At 41 years old, this visionary entrepreneur has accomplished what most tech founders only dream of: transforming a garage startup into Nexus Dynamics, a cybersecurity empire worth $3.5 billion that protects some of the world's largest corporations from digital threats. His company's headquarters, a gleaming 40-story tower in the heart of Silicon Valley, stands as a monument to innovation, determination, and the power of refusing to accept limitations. But Marcus's journey to the pinnacle of the tech industry wasn't built on privilege or family connections. Growing up in Oakland, he watched his single mother work 3 jobs to keep their family afloat, often coming home exhausted from cleaning office buildings where she was treated as invisible by the very executives whose success depended on her labor. Those childhood memories of his mother being dismissed and disrespected in corporate environments she helped maintain burned into his consciousness, creating an unshakable determination to build something different, a technology company where brilliance would be recognized regardless of background, and where innovation would be valued over assumptions. Starting with nothing but a laptop and an idea for revolutionary cybersecurity software, Marcus spent years coding in that cramped garage, living on instant noodles and determination, while venture capitalists dismissed his proposals without seriously considering his innovations. But persistence and genius have a way of breaking through prejudice, and Marcus's groundbreaking approach to threat detection eventually caught the attention of forward-thinking investors who recognized potential over preconceptions. Within a decade, Nexus Dynamics had become the gold standard for corporate cybersecurity, protecting Fortune 500 companies and government agencies while establishing Marcus as one of the most influential leaders in technology. Today represents the end of what should have been a routine weekend business trip to secure a major government contract that will expand Nexus Dynamics into international markets. Marcus had spent 3 days in Washington, D.C., meeting with federal cybersecurity officials and demonstrating how his company's innovations could protect national infrastructure from increasingly sophisticated cyber threats. The meetings had gone exceptionally well, positioning Nexus Dynamics for explosive growth that would create thousands of new jobs and establish American leadership in global cybersecurity. As Marcus's rideshare driver drops him off at the Nexus Dynamics headquarters, he's dressed in the casual jeans and hoodie that have become his signature look, clothing that reflects his belief that innovation comes from comfort and authenticity rather than conformity to corporate stereotypes. He's planning to work late into the night, fine-tuning the final presentation for tomorrow's board meeting, where he'll announce the government contract and outline the company's expansion strategy. But Marcus has no idea that his own security team is about to make assumptions that will not only humiliate him, but expose the dangerous persistence of racial bias even within organizations specifically built to combat inequality and celebrate diversity. If you believe that success should be recognized regardless of how it looks, if you've ever been underestimated because of assumptions about your background, then hit that like button because Marcus's story is about to reveal how prejudice operates even in spaces designed to eliminate it. Comment below if you've experienced discrimination in professional settings and subscribe to our channel because we're exposing the uncomfortable truths about bias in corporate America while celebrating the leaders who refuse to accept the status quo.
But the moment Marcus swiped his executive key card and stepped into his own corporate headquarters, he unknowingly triggered a chain of events that would expose how quickly assumptions can transform routine security into racial profiling. The Nexus Dynamics lobby was everything Marcus had envisioned when he designed the space: sleek, modern, and welcoming, with digital displays showcasing the company's cybersecurity innovations and awards for workplace diversity. But at 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening, the usual bustle of employees and visitors had given way to the quiet hum of after-hours operations, creating an atmosphere where Marcus's casual appearance would be scrutinized rather than celebrated. From the Central Security Control Room, head security guard Robert Chen monitored the entrance cameras with the vigilance that Marcus himself had insisted upon when establishing the company's safety protocols. But when Chen's eyes registered a young black man in jeans and a hoodie entering the building after hours, his training and threat assessment became clouded by unconscious bias that transformed a legitimate entry into suspicious activity. "Lisa, come look at this," Chen called to Security Supervisor Lisa Martinez, his voice carrying concern that would have been absent if Marcus had been wearing a business suit or matched Chen's expectations of what a late-night executive should look like. "We've got a young black male entering the building after hours. Something doesn't feel right about this." Martinez joined Chen at the monitoring station, watching as Marcus moved confidently through the lobby toward the executive elevator bank. What should have appeared as familiarity with the building's layout instead seemed threatening to security personnel who had already decided Marcus didn't belong. "How did he get an access card?" Martinez wondered aloud, not considering that Marcus might legitimately possess executive-level credentials. The situation escalated when Marcus used his keycard to access the private elevator that served only the top executive floors, a system that required the highest security clearance and should have indicated his legitimate authority. But instead of recognizing this as evidence of Marcus's senior position, Chen and Martinez interpreted it as confirmation of their worst suspicions. "This is bad, Lisa," Chen said, his hand moving toward the emergency alert button. "He's gained access to restricted executive areas. Either someone gave him that card or he's stolen it, but there's no way someone like him has legitimate business on the executive floors at this time of night." The phrase, "someone like him," revealed everything about the assumptions driving their response. Marcus's race, age, and casual clothing had triggered mental algorithms that categorized him as a threat rather than the company's founder and leader. The security team that Marcus had personally hired to protect his employees and assets was now treating him as the very danger they were supposed to prevent. Lisa began documenting what she believed was a security breach in progress. Subject appears to be a young African-American male, approximately 25 to 30 years old, wearing casual street clothes. He has somehow obtained executive-level access credentials and is proceeding to restricted areas without authorization. Recommend immediate intervention. As Marcus disappeared into the elevator, heading toward his own office to retrieve important documents for the next day's presentation, Chen and Martinez prepared to confront what they were convinced was a sophisticated intruder. They had no idea they were about to arrest their own CEO, the man whose vision had created their jobs and whose values of inclusion and respect they were about to violate in the most devastating way possible. The irony was staggering. Marcus had specifically chosen this security firm for their reputation of professionalism and bias-free operations, yet they were about to demonstrate how deeply prejudice can penetrate even the most carefully vetted systems. What happened next would transform the security team's suspicious monitoring into a direct confrontation that exposed the most dangerous assumptions about who belongs in corporate leadership positions. Marcus entered his spacious corner office on the 40th floor, the space he had personally designed to reflect both professional excellence and approachable leadership. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of Silicon Valley, while the walls displayed awards for innovation and diversity that represented everything he had built Nexus Dynamics to achieve. But as he moved toward his desk to retrieve the critical presentation materials for tomorrow's board meeting, Marcus had no idea that his own security team was interpreting his legitimate access as evidence of criminal activity. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Chen and Martinez emerged onto the executive floor with the tactical precision of law enforcement officers responding to a break-in. Their footsteps echoed through the quiet hallway as they approached Marcus's office, their hands resting on radios and pepper spray, as if preparing to confront a dangerous intruder rather than their company's founder. "Sir, step away from that desk immediately and put your hands where we can see them," Chen commanded, as he burst through the office door, his voice carrying the authority of someone convinced he was preventing a major corporate theft. The sight of Marcus at the CEO's desk, accessing confidential documents, confirmed every assumption they had made about his criminal intentions. Marcus looked up from his work with genuine confusion, unable to immediately process why security personnel were treating him like a threat in his own office. "I'm sorry, is there some kind of emergency?" he asked, maintaining the calm professionalism that had served him well in countless high-pressure business situations. But his composed response only seemed to inflame Chen's suspicions. "Sir, you're trespassing in a restricted area and attempting to access confidential corporate materials. How did you gain entry to executive floors, and what are you doing in the CEO's private office?" The questions were delivered with aggressive certainty, as if Marcus's guilt was already established. "I work here," Marcus replied simply, the truth seeming so obvious that he couldn't understand the source of their hostility. "This is my office. I'm Marcus Thompson, the CEO of Nexus Dynamics." The claim triggered immediate derision from Martinez, who had convinced herself that she was confronting a sophisticated criminal. "Right, and I'm the company president," she responded with obvious sarcasm. "Sir, no one who looks like you works in executive management here. You've clearly broken into this building using stolen access credentials, and now you're trying to talk your way out of serious criminal charges." The phrase, "no one who looks like you," hung in the air like poison, exposing the racial assumptions that had driven their entire response. Martinez had revealed that Marcus's appearance, his race, his casual clothing, his youthful energy, made his claim to corporate leadership literally unbelievable in her mind. Chen stepped closer, his posture becoming more threatening as he prepared to escalate the confrontation. "We need to see identification right now, and we need an explanation for how you obtained executive access cards. Corporate espionage and breaking and entering are federal crimes, especially when they involve cybersecurity companies with government contracts." The irony was crushing. Marcus was being accused of stealing from his own company, of illegally accessing systems he had designed, of trespassing in a building he owned. His success, his achievement, his very identity as a leader was being dismissed as impossible by employees whose salaries he personally approved. What Chen and Martinez didn't realize was that their prejudiced assumptions were about to trigger an escalation that would transform this confrontation from embarrassing misunderstanding into a career-ending catastrophe that would expose their bias to the entire tech industry.
But what erupted next would transform this confrontation into a nightmare of false imprisonment that exposed the most dangerous consequences of racial profiling in corporate America. Marcus reached into his wallet with deliberate calm, producing his driver's license and several business cards embossed with the Nexus Dynamics logo and his title as Chief Executive Officer. "Here's my identification," he said, extending the documents with the patience of someone accustomed to proving his legitimacy in spaces where others assumed he didn't belong. "And here are my business cards. You can verify my identity through any company directory or by calling the main reception number." But instead of examining the evidence Marcus provided, Chen and Martinez reacted as if he had just confirmed their worst fears about sophisticated criminal activity. "These are obviously fake," Chen declared, without even closely inspecting the professionally printed materials. "Corporate thieves use counterfeit business cards and false identification all the time. This just proves how elaborate this break-in operation really is." The situation exploded when Security Chief Derek Washington arrived on the scene, summoned by reports of a major security breach in progress. Washington, a former police officer with 20 years of law enforcement experience, took one look at Marcus and immediately shifted into high-threat response mode. "We've got a sophisticated break-in here," he announced to his team, speaking about Marcus as if he weren't present. "Subject has gained access to executive floors using fraudulent credentials and is now attempting to use fake identification to support his cover story." Marcus watched in disbelief as Washington radioed for police backup, his voice carrying the urgency typically reserved for violent crimes in progress. "This is Security Chief Washington at Nexus Dynamics headquarters. We need immediate police response for breaking and entering, corporate espionage, and possession of fraudulent identification documents. Subject is a black male, approximately 30 years old, who has somehow gained access to our CEO's private office and is claiming to own the company." The way Washington emphasized Marcus's race in the police report revealed everything about the assumptions driving this catastrophic escalation. What should have been a simple identity verification had become a manhunt based on the premise that someone who looked like Marcus couldn't possibly be telling the truth about his corporate position. "Sir, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, breaking and entering, and attempted corporate theft," he declared, producing handcuffs with the confidence of someone convinced he was preventing a major crime. "You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it, because anything you say will be used against you in court." Marcus found himself being handcuffed in his own office, surrounded by awards bearing his name, while security guards he had personally hired treated him like a dangerous criminal. The psychological impact was devastating. Watching his achievements, his leadership, his very identity being dismissed as impossible lies by people whose careers depended on his success. "Please," Marcus said, maintaining his composure despite the surreal nightmare unfolding around him, "just call my Chief Technology Officer, Sarah Kim. Her number is in the company directory. She can verify my identity immediately." But his reasonable request for verification was interpreted as another manipulation tactic by criminals trying to involve accomplices in their scheme. The most crushing moment came when Washington placed Marcus against the window overlooking Silicon Valley, the view that had inspired him through countless late nights building his company, while he waited for police to arrive and complete what the security team believed was a major arrest. Here was the founder of a billion-dollar enterprise being treated as a criminal in the space he had created to prove that innovation and leadership could transcend racial barriers. If you're feeling the injustice of watching someone's greatest achievements being dismissed as impossible lies, if this story is revealing how prejudice can destroy lives even in spaces designed for success, then hit that like button because this nightmare is about to get even worse. Comment below if you've ever had your qualifications questioned because of how you look, and subscribe to our channel because Marcus's response to this humiliation will prove that truth and justice can still prevail when courage meets opportunity. But even as this nightmare of false imprisonment unfolded around him, Marcus demonstrated the strategic thinking that had built his tech empire, quietly gathering evidence that would soon expose this discrimination in the most devastating way possible. Standing handcuffed in his own office, surrounded by security personnel who had convinced themselves they were heroes preventing corporate espionage, Marcus maintained the composure that had carried him through countless business crises. He understood something his captors didn't, that in the digital age, truth has a way of surfacing, and patience often proves more powerful than protest. Despite the humiliating circumstances, Marcus began methodically documenting everything he could observe, memorizing names, noting statements, and preparing for the moment when he could prove these catastrophic assumptions wrong. "I'm requesting to call my attorney," Marcus said calmly, exercising the legal rights that Washington had mentioned but clearly hoped he wouldn't use. "I'm also asking that you document the exact time of this arrest and the specific charges you're filing, because I intend to pursue this matter through proper legal channels." His composed request for legal representation and documentation seemed to unsettle the security team, who had expected either angry denials or frightened compliance from someone they believed was a criminal. Washington responded defensively, "Sir, you can call your lawyer from the police station after you've been properly processed. Right now you're in custody for serious felonies, and we're not going to give you opportunities to coordinate with accomplices or destroy evidence." During this tense standoff, an unexpected voice of reason emerged from the most unlikely source. Maria Santos, the night janitor who had been quietly cleaning offices on the executive floor, approached the group with obvious concern and confusion. "Excuse me, Mr. Washington, but why are you arresting Mr. Thompson? He works here all the time. I see him in this office almost every night." Her intervention should have been the moment of clarity that resolved the entire situation, but instead it triggered even more aggressive responses from the security team. Chen turned on Maria with obvious irritation. "Ma'am, this man is obviously lying to you about his identity. He's a criminal who's broken into this building, and you're being manipulated by someone trying to use you as an alibi." Martinez joined the dismissal of Maria's testimony with condescending certainty. "These corporate thieves are very sophisticated. They study company employees, learn names and routines, then use that information to convince people like you that they belong here. You're obviously a good person who wants to help, but you're being deceived by a professional criminal." The way the security team dismissed Maria's eyewitness testimony revealed the depth of their commitment to their false narrative. Rather than consider that their assumptions might be wrong, they chose to believe that a hard-working janitor was either lying or being manipulated, rather than accept that Marcus could legitimately be the CEO.
The arrival of police officers James Rodriguez and Patricia Lee shifted the dynamics of the situation, but not in the way the security team had anticipated. Officer Rodriguez, a 10-year veteran with extensive training in de-escalation and bias recognition, immediately assessed the scene with professional skepticism rather than automatic support for the corporate security claims. "What exactly are the charges you're filing against this individual?" Rodriguez asked Washington, his tone suggesting he wanted concrete evidence rather than assumptions. When Washington began explaining about sophisticated corporate espionage and fraudulent credentials, Rodriguez turned to Marcus with genuine interest rather than presumption of guilt. "Sir, can you tell me your version of what happened here?" Rodriguez asked Marcus, treating him as a potential victim rather than a presumed perpetrator. This simple act of giving Marcus equal voice in the narrative marked a crucial turning point in how the situation was being perceived by trained law enforcement professionals. Marcus's response was calm, detailed, and completely at odds with the frantic accusations being made by the security team. "Officer, I'm the CEO and founder of Nexus Dynamics. I returned from a business trip tonight and came to my office to prepare materials for tomorrow's board meeting. My own security team arrested me because they don't believe someone who looks like me could hold this position." Officer Lee, who had been quietly observing the body language and demeanor of everyone involved, noted the stark contrast between Marcus's composed professionalism and the agitated defensiveness of the security personnel. "Sir, do you have any way to verify your identity and position with the company?" she asked, treating the question as routine documentation rather than criminal investigation. "Yes," Marcus replied. "I can provide multiple forms of verification, including access to company systems that only the CEO would have, contact information for board members and senior executives, and personal details about company operations that would be impossible for an outsider to know." Meanwhile, the security team continued their campaign to discredit any evidence that contradicted their narrative. Washington loudly discussed with his colleagues how they had prevented a major corporate theft through their vigilance, while Chen provided commentary to the arriving officers about sophisticated criminals who use social engineering to manipulate employees and law enforcement. What none of them realized was that their confident assertions of heroism were being observed by trained police officers who were beginning to recognize the hallmarks of racial profiling rather than legitimate security concerns. The evidence was mounting, the witnesses were speaking up, and the truth was about to emerge in a way that would shatter every assumption the security team had made about their own competence and judgment. The moment of revelation was approaching, and it would be more devastating to the security team's careers and reputations than they could possibly imagine.
Right at that moment, when the false accusations had reached their absolute peak, and it seemed like prejudice would triumph once again, Marcus decided it was time to reveal the truth that would turn this entire nightmare on its head and destroy every assumption his captors had made. The profound silence that followed Marcus's next words was so complete that the gentle hum of the building's ventilation system seemed deafeningly loud. "Officer Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that hadn't been present before, "I'd like to make a phone call to verify my identity. With your permission, I'm going to contact my Chief Technology Officer, who can confirm my position and resolve this situation immediately." Officer Rodriguez nodded, treating the request as reasonable rather than suspicious, but the security team's reaction was swift and predictable. "Don't let him coordinate with accomplices," Washington warned urgently. "Corporate thieves work in teams, and he's obviously trying to get his partners involved to support his story." But Marcus was already dialing the emergency contact number that only senior executives possessed. "Sarah, this is Marcus," he said, speaking to his CTO, who had been his business partner for over 8 years. "I'm at headquarters, and I need you here immediately. I'm being held by our own security team because they don't believe I work here." Sarah Kim's response carried clearly through the phone speaker, her voice showing immediate alarm and disbelief. "Marcus, what are you talking about? Are you hurt? This is insane. How can our own security not recognize you? I'm leaving my house right now and will be there in 20 minutes. The genuine concern in Sarah's voice and her obvious familiarity with Marcus began to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of everyone present. But Washington remained committed to his narrative, turning to the police officers with desperate certainty. "This is exactly how sophisticated criminals operate. They have people who will vouch for them, create false alibis, and support their cover stories." But Marcus did something that sent shockwaves through the entire group. He asked Officer Rodriguez to escort him to his own desk computer, where he could provide irrefutable proof of his identity. "Officer, I can access systems that only the CEO would have clearance for, including personnel records, financial data, and security protocols that would be impossible for an outsider to know." Under police supervision, Marcus approached his own workstation and began the multi-factor authentication process that protected Nexus Dynamics' most sensitive information. His fingerprint scan was accepted immediately, followed by retinal verification and voice recognition that confirmed his identity at the highest security levels. "Computer, display current board of directors' contact information and executive organizational chart," he commanded. The computer's response was immediate and unmistakable. "Welcome, Mr. Thompson. Displaying requested executive information. Would you like me to initiate emergency contact protocols for senior leadership?"
The system's recognition of Marcus's voice and immediate compliance with executive-level commands provided technological proof that no imposter could fake.
But the most devastating confirmation came when Marcus accessed the company's internal security feeds, revealing footage of himself entering and leaving the building countless times over the past several years. Officer Rodriguez, these are security recordings showing me working in this office for the past 3 years. As you can see, I have legitimate access and have been here regularly. The irrefutable evidence began to crack Washington's confidence, but he made one final, desperate attempt to maintain his narrative. This proves he's been planning this heist for years, gaining access, studying our systems, building relationships with employees to support his criminal operation. At that crucial moment, the elevator doors opened with their familiar chime, and Sarah Kim burst onto the executive floor with obvious urgency and concern. "Marcus!" she called out, rushing toward the group with the kind of worried authority that only a senior executive would display. "Are you okay? What the hell is going on here?" Her immediate recognition of Marcus, her obvious concern for his well-being, and her professional demeanor as she demanded explanations from the security team provided human confirmation of everything the technology had already proven. Sarah turned to Washington with barely controlled fury. "Derek, why are you holding our CEO in handcuffs? Have you lost your mind?" The mention of Marcus's title by someone the security team knew to be a legitimate senior executive finally began to penetrate Washington's wall of denial. But the most crushing moment came when Sarah produced her phone and showed recent text messages between herself and Marcus about tomorrow's board meeting, photos of them at company events, and email chains discussing strategic initiatives that only C-level executives would be privy to. "Officer Rodriguez, this is Marcus Thompson, the founder and CEO of Nexus Dynamics. These security guards have arrested their own boss based on nothing more than racial profiling and assumptions about what a tech CEO should look like." The evidence had become overwhelming. The technological proof was irrefutable, and the human testimony was unassailable. Officer Rodriguez looked at his partner with raised eyebrows, both of them beginning to understand that they had walked into a situation far more complex and disturbing than a simple corporate break-in. The security team, who had been so confident in their heroic crime prevention just minutes before, now stood frozen in absolute terror, finally understanding that they hadn't just made a mistake, they had arrested their own CEO, destroyed their careers, and exposed their racial bias to law enforcement officers who would be required to document everything that had occurred.
What followed next was a swift and devastating display of corporate justice that would send shockwaves through the entire security industry and prove that racial profiling comes with real, immediate consequences that destroy careers in minutes. Marcus looked directly at Sarah Kim, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had just witnessed the complete failure of systems he had trusted to protect his company and employees. "Sarah, I want you to document everything that occurred here tonight, because we're about to implement changes that will ensure this level of discrimination never happens again in any workplace where I have authority." He gestured toward the security team members who are now trembling with the realization that their careers were about to end. These security personnel arrested me in my own office, refused to verify my identity, dismissed witness testimony from Maria, and accused me of corporate espionage based solely on my appearance and their assumptions about what a CEO should look like. The terminations began immediately and without ceremony, each one delivered with the precision of someone who understood that swift action was the only appropriate response to such blatant discrimination. "Derek Washington," Marcus announced, his voice carrying throughout the executive floor. "Your employment as security chief is terminated effective immediately. Your decision to arrest me without investigation, your dismissal of witness testimony, and your complete failure to follow basic identity verification procedures demonstrate incompetence and bias that cannot be tolerated in any security role.
Washington opened his mouth to protest, perhaps to offer some desperate explanation or apology, but Marcus continued with unwavering resolve. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings and surrender all company property. Your access to Nexus Dynamics facilities has been permanently revoked and security will escort you from the building. Robert Chen's termination followed with equal swiftness and finality. Robert, your role in initiating this false arrest, your assumption that someone who looks like me couldn't legitimately access executive areas, and your refusal to consider evidence that contradicted your prejudiced assumptions make you unfit for any security position. Your employment is terminated immediately. Lisa Martinez, who had been so confident in dismissing Maria's testimony and supporting the arrest, received her verdict with devastating clarity. Lisa, your participation in racial profiling, your dismissal of witness statements from a company employee, and your assumption that my business cards were counterfeit rather than legitimate corporate materials demonstrate judgment so poor that it poses a security risk to this company. You're terminated effective immediately. But Marcus's response extended beyond simple terminations to address the broader implications of what had occurred. He turned to Officer Rodriguez with respectful firmness. Officer, I want to commend you for maintaining professionalism and asking questions rather than making assumptions. However, I will be filing formal complaints about how this false arrest was initiated and requesting a full investigation into the security firm's training and bias prevention protocols.
The most powerful moment came when Marcus addressed Maria Santos, the janitor who had courageously spoken up despite being dismissed and insulted by the security team. Maria, I want to personally thank you for having the courage to tell the truth, even when these officers refused to listen to you. Your integrity and bravery tonight represent the best of what Nexus Dynamics stands for, and I want to discuss how we can recognize your valor and ensure that employee voices are always heard and respected. Maria's eyes filled with tears as she realized that her attempt to help hadn't gone unnoticed, despite being dismissed by the security team. Mr. Thompson, I just knew something was wrong. I see you here all the time, working late, treating everyone with respect. It didn't make sense that you would be stealing from your own company. Her words resonated throughout the executive floor, highlighting the absurdity of the security team's assumptions and the courage it took for a night shift employee to challenge authority figures who were convinced of their own righteousness. Sarah Kim was already coordinating the immediate operational response to ensure Nexus Dynamics security wouldn't be compromised by the sudden loss of the entire security team. Marcus, I'm contacting our backup security firm immediately. We'll have professional, properly trained personnel here within 2 hours, and I'll personally oversee the transition to ensure there are no gaps in building protection. Officer Rodriguez approached Marcus with obvious respect and concern. Mr. Thompson, I want to apologize for how this situation unfolded. While we followed proper procedures once we arrived, it's clear that this arrest should never have been initiated. We'll be filing a detailed report about the circumstances that led to this incident. Officer Lee added her own perspective. Sir, in 15 years of law enforcement, I've seen how racial profiling can escalate routine situations into dangerous confrontations. What happened here tonight could have had much more serious consequences if you hadn't remained calm and if we hadn't asked the right questions. As the terminated security personnel were escorted from the building, their faces showing the devastating realization that their prejudice had destroyed their careers and reputations in the security industry, Marcus was already planning something far more comprehensive than simple firings. Sarah, what happened here tonight was unacceptable, but it's going to become the catalyst for transformation that protects every employee and visitor who enters our facilities, Marcus said, his voice carrying the determination that had built Nexus Dynamics from a garage startup into a global technology leader. This isn't just about firing biased security guards. This is about creating systems that ensure workplace belonging and safety for everyone, regardless of how they look or what assumptions people make about their authority.
The revolution that was about to unfold would reshape not just Nexus Dynamics security protocols, but establish new standards for the entire corporate security industry's approach to inclusion, bias prevention, and professional recognition of diverse leadership.
What Marcus announced next would not only revolutionize his tech empire, but spark a nationwide transformation in how corporate security addresses bias and creates truly inclusive workplace environments for leaders who don't fit traditional stereotypes. Standing in his executive office, surrounded by employees, media representatives who had begun arriving after word of the incident spread across tech industry networks, and law enforcement officials documenting the unprecedented false arrest, Marcus unveiled an initiative that would become the gold standard for corporate anti-discrimination efforts throughout Silicon Valley and beyond. Tonight marks the launch of Project Recognition, he declared, his voice carrying the same passion that had driven him from a garage startup to a billion-dollar empire. This isn't just about preventing what happened here from occurring again. This is about fundamentally transforming how workplace security operates and ensuring that leadership visibility and belonging aren't determined by fitting stereotypical expectations of what success looks like. The scope of Project Recognition was revolutionary in both its comprehensiveness and its commitment to technological innovation combined with human dignity. Marcus outlined a $4 million initiative that would be implemented across all Nexus Dynamics facilities and shared with partner companies within 60 days. Every security professional working in any capacity with Nexus Dynamics will complete intensive bias recognition training developed in partnership with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Anti-Defamation League, and leading civil rights organizations, he announced. But this won't be generic corporate sensitivity training that security guards forget the moment they leave the classroom. This will be immersive, scenario-based education that addresses real situations and creates genuine accountability for discriminatory assumptions. The training program Marcus described went far beyond typical workplace workshops. Security personnel would learn to recognize unconscious bias in threat assessment, understand the historical context of racial profiling in corporate environments, practice inclusive security protocols that protect all employees equally, and face real consequences for bias-driven behavior. We're partnering with Stanford University's Bias Research Lab and MIT's Computer Science Department to develop assessment protocols that measure not just what security staff claim to have learned, but how they actually treat employees and visitors from different backgrounds in real-world situations, Marcus explained. But training represented only the foundation of Project Recognition's transformative approach. Marcus announced groundbreaking changes to security technology and operational practices that would fundamentally alter how corporate protection functions. Moving forward, every Nexus Dynamics facility will implement advanced facial recognition and employee identification systems that immediately identify all staff members, contractors, and authorized personnel, regardless of their clothing, time of day, or current appearance, he declared. No employee should ever have to prove their right to be in their own workplace. The technology component of Project Recognition represented perhaps the most innovative aspect of the entire initiative. Marcus revealed that Nexus Dynamics would be developing artificial intelligence systems designed to detect and prevent discriminatory security responses in real time. These systems will monitor security interactions, identify patterns of differential treatment based on race or appearance, and alert management immediately when bias appears to be influencing security decisions, he explained. If the system detects that employees or visitors of certain backgrounds are being stopped, questioned, or challenged more frequently than others, it will trigger immediate intervention and investigation protocols.
The community impact elements of Project Recognition address the broader workplace equity issues that had motivated Marcus throughout his career. We're establishing leadership visibility programs that ensure diverse executives are recognized and celebrated throughout our organization, mentorship initiatives that support minority entrepreneurs in tech, and partnerships with historically black colleges and universities to create direct pathways into cybersecurity careers, he announced. Maria Santos, the janitor who had courageously defended Marcus during the false arrest, was invited to share her perspective on the broader implications of workplace bias. Mr. Thompson is addressing something that working people like me see every day, but rarely have the power to change, she said, her voice carrying the weight of countless encounters with discrimination. When security treats some employees like they don't belong, it affects everyone's sense of safety and dignity at work. Tonight's announcement gives me hope that my voice and my observations actually matter. 6 months later, the transformation was undeniable, and it exceeded even Marcus's ambitious expectations. Nexus Dynamics had become a model of inclusive corporate security that business schools studied and other tech companies attempted to replicate. The advanced identification systems, combined with comprehensive bias training, had eliminated discriminatory security incidents completely. Employee satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs, particularly among staff from underrepresented backgrounds who reported feeling genuinely welcomed and protected rather than surveilled and suspected. The broader impact of Project Recognition rippled throughout Silicon Valley and the entire corporate security industry. Competing tech companies began implementing similar bias prevention programs after facing pressure from employees and shareholders inspired by Nexus Dynamics leadership. Security firms started requiring anti-discrimination training as standard protocol. Universities began offering courses in inclusive security practices. The technology solutions pioneered by Nexus Dynamics were licensed to corporations, government agencies, and educational institutions across the country. Marcus's story became required reading in business schools, cybersecurity programs, and civil rights organizations as an example of how leadership can transform personal trauma into lasting positive change. But for Marcus, the most meaningful validation came from employees like Maria Santos, who now served on the company's Workplace Equity Advisory Board and had become a powerful advocate for inclusive security practices. Leadership visibility and workplace belonging shouldn't depend on fitting stereotypical expectations of what success looks like, Marcus said during his keynote address at the National Association of Security Professionals annual conference. What happened to me that night was humiliating and traumatic, but it became the catalyst for changes that are protecting millions of employees across America. Sometimes it takes experiencing injustice personally to understand the urgency of fighting it systematically. But the real victory comes when we use our platforms to ensure that others never have to endure what we survived. The legacy of that false arrest had been transformed into a nationwide movement for workplace equity that continues to expand, proving that individual courage combined with technological innovation and systemic action can create lasting change that makes corporate leadership truly accessible to everyone who earns it through merit, regardless of how they look or where they come from.
Marcus Thompson's story reveals a painful truth about corporate America, that even in spaces designed for innovation and inclusion, prejudice can transform legitimate authority into suspected criminality in a matter of minutes. What makes this story truly powerful isn't just the dramatic arrest or the swift justice, but how Marcus transformed his personal trauma into protection for millions of employees who will never know his name but will benefit from his courage to demand systemic change. The real lesson here goes deeper than security protocols or bias training. It's about understanding that when we witness discrimination, we have a choice. We can be like Maria Santos, who courageously spoke truth to power despite being dismissed and insulted, or we can be silent bystanders who allow prejudice to flourish in spaces where everyone deserves dignity. Marcus didn't just fire biased security guards. He rebuilt entire systems because he understood that lasting change requires more than punishment. It demands transformation. From an insider's perspective, what Marcus accomplished with Project Recognition represents something revolutionary in corporate security.
Most companies respond to discrimination incidents with damage control and superficial policy changes. Marcus responded by fundamentally altering how workplace protection operates, investing $4 million in technology and training that prevents bias before it escalates into false arrests, and creating systems that ensure leadership visibility isn't determined by fitting stereotypical expectations. The most profound truth in this story is that our worst experiences can become our greatest opportunities to protect others. Marcus could have quietly settled this incident and moved on with his career. Instead, he chose to use his platform, his resources, and his influence to ensure that what happened to him would never happen to anyone else in corporate America. That's the difference between revenge and justice, between anger and action, between being a victim and being a catalyst for systemic change. But here's what we all need to understand. Marcus Thompson shouldn't have to be a billionaire CEO to receive basic respect in his own workplace. The fact that it took proving massive authority to stop a false arrest shows us how much work remains in creating truly inclusive corporate environments. Every time we choose silence over speaking up, every time we accept that's just how security works, we're enabling the very systems that create these traumatic moments. Workplace belonging and leadership recognition should celebrate the diversity of people who build successful companies, not serve as gatekeeping mechanisms that determine worthiness based on appearance. Marcus's courage proved that when we refuse to accept discrimination as normal, when we use our platforms to demand better, we can create ripple effects that transform entire industries and protect countless employees who face similar challenges every day. If this story moved you, if you believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity in their workplace, regardless of how much authority they appear to have, then your voice matters in this fight. Hit that like button to show YouTube that stories about justice and transformation deserve to reach more people. Drop a comment sharing your own experiences with workplace discrimination or telling us what change you want to see in corporate security, because real transformation starts with real conversations about uncomfortable truths. And please subscribe to this channel because we're committed to sharing more stories that expose injustice while celebrating the leaders who refuse to accept that's just how things are. Together, we can ensure that Marcus's courage creates the lasting change our workplaces desperately need.